Welcome to Friends in Fiction, 5 best-selling authors and the stories. Novelists Mary Kay Andrews, Kristen Harmel, Christy Woodson Harvey, Patty Callahan Henry, and Mary Alice Monroe are 5 longtime friends with more than 80 published books to their credit. In 2020, they created Friends in Fiction to provide author interviews and fascinating insider talk about publishing and writing, and to highlight independent bookstores. These friends discuss the books they've written, the books they're reading now, and the art of storytelling. If you love books and you're curious about the writing world, you're in the right place.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our weekly Wednesday evening show where we explore the world behind your favorite books. We are so glad you're here. I'm Kristen Harmel.
I'm Christy Woodson Harvey.
I'm Patty Callahan Henry.
And I'm Mary Alice. Oh, that's for the blooper tape. I'm Mary Kay Andrews.
What? And this is Friends in Fiction, a handful of New York Times best-selling authors with identity crises in this process. Endless stories, all to support independent booksellers. Tonight, you'll meet Daryn Kagan and Paula Faris, and possibly Mary Alice Monroe Andrews. I don't know. But Daryn and Paula, 2 women you may feel like you already know, because chances are they've been on your television more times than you can count. Daryn used to be the main anchor on CNN, where she worked for 12 years. And Paula was on The View and Good Morning America Weekend and continues to be a correspondent for ABC News. Both have books out now, and both have found new and perhaps surprising roads to joy where they least expected to. We'll talk to both women about their careers and about their books, Daryn's Hope Possible and Paula's Called Out. And we'll also speak to them about finding joy in the journey.
But first, we want to share something with you that we are starting to do a bit differently. If you've tuned in before, you might know that we have a featured bookstore of the week every week since our very first episode in April of 2020. Well, from now on, we'll be asking our guests to tell you about their favorite stores. And from time to time, we'll highlight our own favorite indies. But each week, instead of offering you 10% off at the store of the week, we will be updating our own bookshop.org shop, where you'll get a built-in discount on most books and where a portion of your purchase will go to help independent bookstores nationwide.
And of course, we encourage you to support your own local stores too. It is so important to shop local wherever you are, because bookstores are such a vital part of our communities across the nation and across the world. So if you have a bookstore in your area, make sure to support them so that their doors can stay open.
Absolutely. And, let's be honest, all of us shop at big stores too. We love it when Target and Walmart and Costco stock our books. And we're thrilled that you can grab a novel at the same time you're picking up your milk and eggs. And ordering online is easy. We do it. We just ask that when you're thinking about how to spend your money in a way that does some good, you keep your local bookstores in mind too. Because when you shop there, when you shop local, even if it costs a few dollars more, your money is going straight back into your community.
Well, speaking of buying books at all these fabulous bookstores, we have a special treat for you this evening. It is time to tell you about our guests, Daryn Kagan and Paula Faris.
I'm still spaced out. Okay. Well, Daryn was an anchor on CNN for 12 years. During her time at CNN, she reported on presidential elections, traveled to Africa with musician Bono. Is it Bono or Bono? I never know. Bono?
Bono.
This is how you know I'm old. To report on AIDS and famine. And she reported live from the red carpet of several Academy Award ceremonies. She is one of only a few national news anchors who were live on the air during the morning of September 11, 2001.
That's incredible. After leaving the network in 2006, she launched DarynKagan.com, which if you haven't been to, you must, which focuses on uplifting and positive news, and extended her content to documentaries, radio, and books. She has given a TED Talk about how to watch the news and get inspired, and she has also contributed to CBS Sunday Morning. Daryn's PBS film, Breaking the Curse, won the 2008 Gracie Award for Outstanding Documentary. She also recently released a book, Hope Possible, and network news anchors thoughts on losing her job, finding love, a new career, and my dog. Always my dog, which we'll be talking to her about tonight. Daryn lives in Georgia with her husband, and she has 2 young adult daughters.
Now, Paula Faris spent over 2 decades in broadcast journalism, including 9 years at ABC News, where she co-anchored Good Morning America Weekend, co-hosted The View, and launched Journeys of Faith with Paula Faris. The Emmy Award-winning journalist has reported on everything from politics to entertainment to sports, and she's interviewed high-profile people such as Joe Biden, i.e. the president.
You're on it tonight,
I've heard
girl.
of him. I've heard of him. Yeah.
On it.
Tom Hanks, i.e. Forrest Gump, and Hillary Clinton.
Paula recently released her first book, Called Out: Why I Traded 2 Dream Jobs for a Life of True Calling, which explores the events that led her to make a change in her career and allowed her to discover who she was outside of her work. She also hosts the Paula Faris Faith and Calling podcast. Paula is a graduate of Cedarville University in Cedarville, Ohio, and currently lives in South Carolina with her husband, John, and their 3 kids.
You know, both women reached the height of their careers and then took a left turn into what I like to think of as the beginning of happily ever after. In other words, you know, I think the lesson we're so often taught is that we have to work for years and years and years, always striving for the next big thing. But both Daryn and Paula said enough. They stepped off the merry-go-round. They took control of their destinies, and they found incredible ways to bring good into both their own lives and into the world at large. So, Sean, can you bring Daryn and Paula on, please?
Hi,
Hi, ladies. Hey, ladies.
Welcome. It's so wonderful to have the 2 of you here.
So good to be with you.
It's great to be with you. And Daryn, apparently we're not that far apart from one another. You're in Georgia and I'm in South Carolina. So we probably should have done this together tonight, but we're just now realizing that.
So that's asking for a future girl date, I think.
I love that.
Exactly.
Yes. Rain check.
Right.
Wait, hello. Are they having a party without us?
I
Did
know.
they just
I'll
make
do that.
I
plans?
want to come. I'm in North Carolina.
Yeah, well, one big Southern party I think we need to have.
That was a given, ladies. That was a given.
Okay.
You were the connectors.
Thank you, Paula.
So, yeah.
Phew. I thought they were running off together.
Thank goodness.
Okay. So, ladies, we're going to talk about your amazing books in just a moment. But first, we want to start off and start talking about the 20th anniversary of September 11th, which is only 3 days from now. 20 years.
Yeah.
Wow. Because the 2 of you were both working as journalists on that fateful day in 2001. Daryn, Kristen's essay this week for Parade Magazine was actually about your journey. Did you read it?
I did.
So
Whenever I read
moving.
such a beautiful piece, I read things like that and I go, oh, I want to be her. I'm like, okay.
That is
I am
me.
her. I want to feel like what it should feel like to get that grand experience. So thank you, friends.
It was so moving. I've read it a couple of times. So for me, that day, I remember, everybody has that memory, right? I would just dropped off my 2 oldest at elementary school, and I was at the gym. And most people listening to this don't believe that, but I was at the gym. I know this is shocking news, but it was 20 years ago.
Okay.
And I was with my 3-year-old who is now 23. And I saw this second plane hit live on the gym's TV over the screen. And everything in that room stopped. Everyone stood stock still. Nobody knew what to say. It was this really eerie silence. And I ran total mother's instinct. And I grabbed my 3-year-old from the little nursery and went to my friend Susan's house. I was in Atlanta at the time to watch the news. And we stayed there all day, horrified and knowing, I kept saying, this is a before and after in our lives. This is a before and after.
It is.
And it ended up being very true. It was a before and after. So Daryn, can you tell us a bit about what you remember from that morning 20 years ago?
So when the first plane hit, Paula knows how this works. This was like 15 minutes before my co-anchor, Leon Harris, and I are about to go on the air. So we were in the makeup room, which is where nice little news anchors go right before they go on the air. And one of the producers popped in and said, hey, this thing's happening in New York. Turn up the volume on the monitors in here. I think you need to watch. And at that point, if we can dial back our memories, when that first plane hit, I don't think it was within the thought of any of us that was anything possibly more than like a private plane, a small private plane that
an
went
accident.
a long way. Yes, certainly an accident. And then Leah and I sat down, the first anchors moved out, and we were interviewing aviation experts. I mean, you just kind of go, CNN is made for this kind of breaking news. And so there's just kind of a thing that you do, and they call on experts and you interview them while there is a live feed of what's going on. So we were on the air interviewing this aviation expert when we watched the second plane go into that second tower, which was the point, I believe, where the world shifted, where we realized this was something different, bigger, and the world was never really the same.
That's right.
You're absolutely right.
You know, I remember I was at home writing in a little backyard hut that was my office at the time. And my memory is hazy about how I found out. But I know that I stopped working and I was glued to the television the rest of the morning. I called my husband at work because that was my instinct. Even though I knew it had happened in New York and then DC, my instinct was to call my husband to make sure he was okay.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was one of those days when I missed my old life as a newspaper reporter of being part of a breaking news story. And, you know, in our after show tonight, we're going to be expanding a little bit more on our personal memories. And we're going to bring you our managing director, Meg Walker. And she's going to share her story because she was pregnant with her daughter, Grace. And she was commuting in by train from New Jersey to Lower Manhattan when the first plane hit. And you are going to want to stick around for the rest of that harrowing tale. But now, Paula, tell us about your experience. You were working at a TV station in Dayton at the time. Is that correct?
I actually, ladies, this is really interesting because this was such a pivotal moment for me personally and professionally. Pivotal just culturally. We all, as you said, Patty, we all remember exactly where we were. I was also working out in Dayton, Ohio, newly married. We were married about a year. I was working in radio sales at the time. So I got a degree in broadcast communications. I emphasized in television production. I'd been out of school about 4 years. I really felt this burning to get back into television news. I had interned. I had most of my experience. That's really where my heart was, but I allowed my fears to paralyze me. And I still remember watching the coverage. I watched NBC all day, and I was so gripped by the coverage that I told my husband, I said, this is it. This is the moment where I need to get back into television news. So I quit my job. Like a couple of days later, I was making, as a 25-year-old, I was making probably $50,000 at the time. And radio sales, you guys, I was crushing it. But I had this burning desire. I had to stop out. I couldn't run away from it any longer, this dream. I had to really press into my fears. So I quit my job and I handed my resume out to all of the local television stations in Dayton, Ohio. I substitute taught for a while just to pay the bills before I got a job. And I got hired to be a production assistant, making $7 an hour at the dual affiliate station in Dayton, Ohio. So I started down here, but because I knew how to shoot and edit and produce and write, because that was my background, I was able to, I presented the news director probably about 4 months after I was there. I said, hey, I put this tape together. Can you just take a look at it? I wasn't expecting for him to put me on the air because I was just a lowly PA. But he liked what he saw. He knew that I could what we call one-man band in the business, so we can do all of it. And he put me on the air, and that's really, but 9/11 for me, yes, culturally, you know, it's a moment that's so pivotal, but for me, that was the moment I decided to press into my fear and go for this thing on my heart. So
That
So,
is
amazing.
incredible.
Paula and Mary Kay, as a former newspaper reporter, you actually are talking about something that's kind of like their not the dirty little secret, but the thing that we don't really talk about as journalists in public, and that is on the big day, that is where you want to be.
Yes.
So it's this dichotomy of this is horrible,
Right.
but get out of my way because it's my story.
Yeah, the fire bell is going off.
Yeah.
At that point, I'd been out of newspapers for 10 years, but the fire bell was still going off. And I was still thinking, how could I muscle my way into this story?
Yeah.
Right.
For about 5 minutes.
That's a challenge. And Daryn, you bring that up. And nothing made me feel more alive, in my 20 years in broadcasting than being on the scene and chasing breaking news. But it's also reconciling the fact that I want to be the first on the air, or I want to get this story, but not becoming callous to human emotions, So that was one of the big struggles with me. And Daryn, you might feel the same way, seeing the absolute best in people on a daily basis, but also the absolute worst. In some ways you have to protect yourself from that, because otherwise it can affect you in so many negative ways. So it's almost a defense mechanism to protect yourself. But then at the same time, like, I didn't want to become callous to human emotions. So that was a delicate balance that I was always trying to find.
Wow. Yeah. That is so interesting that you took that and, really made this incredible change in your life. I was in high school. So I remember like coming out, it was in geometry, and this is so bizarre. Like, I remember so well, I guess everyone remembers so well, but I was like standing by my locker talking to my best friend about what we were going to wear to homecoming. Like, that's what we were talking about. And her boyfriend came up and said, "Oh, this is super weird. I just heard that this little plane or helicopter or something hit one of the Twin Towers." And we were like, "Oh, weird." And we kind of brushed it off. But I remember having this really weird feeling about it. And actually, instead of going to my next class, I went into the library, and we had these huge TVs in our library that were like running the news all the time. And I was standing in the library completely by myself when the second plane hit, which was really crazy. And I don't know how, no one would have even known I was in there. But I remember for some reason, like, that my boyfriend at the time coming in the library where I was standing, and he was like, "Come on, we're leaving. We're going home." And I would never have left school, but you were so shell-shocked about like what is going on and what's happening in the world. And I think, all these things were happening, and we were like, what's going to happen next? And you're right, Daryn, about that before and after. Like, I think especially as a teenager, it was like that moment, it was like that last moment that you ever really felt like totally safe in the world. Because before that, the world was a completely safe place for me. As a 15-year-old, in my mind, in my mind it was, like nothing that like that had ever happened before. So, anyway, it's just really hard to believe that it's been 20 years. But, one of the things we'll talk about tonight, of course, is the joy that you've both found in reporting good and inspiring news. But over the course of your lives as journalists, you've had to report some really difficult things, such as September 11th and its aftermath. And I think that sometimes we forget that, as Daryn said in Kristen's Parade article today, the people in front of the camera have their own stories too. Daryn, I know that a couple years after September 11th, you wound up as a war correspondent in Kuwait. And I'd love to hear from both of you what it's like to report difficult news when you're struggling with your own worries or fears or feelings about that news. So Daryn, could you start us off?
So when you're talking about when the U.S. was going to invade Kuwait,
or just
Iraq,
just in general. How it is, when you're reporting
for
on
me, I would say, at the time, again, I was chasing the big story. If we were going to war, I wanted to go to war. Kind of funny side thing, I was also the one who covered the Oscars. So I had to go to New York and have a gown stain. I had two things going. Either we were going to go to war and I had my go bag, or I had my gown that I was going to wear.
Oh my gosh. Oh my word.
Juxtaposition.
Yes. So I had both. What are you going to wear? I had both things ready to go. Interestingly, with war, now another personal thing. As we were, they don't just send you to war. They send you to war school. There's a lot of training. There's a lot of thought that goes in it. I was single at the time. I consulted with my brother and sister. We decided we were not going to tell our parents that this was going to happen. It happened when they were both having big health struggles. My dad was in one hospital in Los Angeles, And my mom had been diagnosed with breast cancer, and she was having surgery the next day at another hospital. And we went to visit my dad, and we were downstairs in the cafeteria, and something came on one of the monitors about, potential war. And she just looked at me like, how a mother knows.
Yeah.
And she just said, she's like, "You're going, aren't you?" And I said, "Well, I just fessed up. Like I've been caught blowing turkey or something." And like, so where's this moment? So my mother's gonna have breast cancer surgery. My dad's upstairs, very sick.
Yeah.
And my mother looked at me and she said, "So what are you gonna wear?" And I said, "What?" And so my mom was always about how you dress, right? And she's like, "Well, what are the ladies wearing to war these days?" I'm like, she's like, we're going shopping. We're going shopping. I'm like, "What? Dad's upstairs in the hospital. You're having breast cancer and we're going shopping?" And she looked at me and she said, "I can't control what happens to him, and I can't control what happens in my surgery. But I'll be damned if I'm not going to control how my kid looks on international TV."
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Your mom's too much.
So that's what we did. We went shopping. Got a great, it was always about what you were going to wear. So yeah, that's my memory of that was what was important at that moment.
Yes,
I
totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
So, Paula, what about you? I mean,
Yep.
what's it like to report that difficult news while you're juggling your own feelings?
I think that the stories that were hardest for me to report on, Newtown. I distinctly remember doing this interview for 2020 and Nightline and Good Morning America, and I had to fly to I believe it was North Carolina to interview these parents whose daughter had been brutally murdered by the husband. And the stories that always got me were the ones where a parent was losing a child. And Daryn can testify to this, how difficult it is, I think, to be a working mom. But to be a working mom in television is really, really hard. As Daryn says, you have to be ready to go at a moment's notice. And so there's a lot of personal sacrifice involved. One moment that I can really recall was I was pregnant with my third child, and this was in 2013, and ABC asked me to go cover the World Cup in Brazil. And I knew that it'd be gone about 4 to 5 weeks. And I'm doing the math and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to have a 3 or 4 month old. And I've got my other kids are 6 and 4, and I have to leave them for over a month, but also feeling this pull like, well, this is part of the job. I don't want somebody else to take my job. So it was that the hard part for me was trying to do my job and also at the same time reconciling that I have a young family. So what I ended up doing is I said, I'll go, but I want to take my newborn with me because I was nursing him, So here I am flying. I used to have these pictures. I left my older two back with my husband, which is really hard to be away from your kids for, over 4 weeks. But I was nursing him. I hired a nanny down there who I'd never met. You guys, like looking back on it, I'm like, what did I do? And I'm based in Rio, and the World Cup is different than, let's say, the Olympics, because for the Olympics, all of the sports take place in one city. When you're at the World Cup, they're in the same country, but Brazil is a big country. So I'm here I am nursing. I'm like, can you guys ship back some breastfeeding bags? I ran out to Brazil because I would have to leave my baby with the nanny for like 3-4 days at a time to go cover a match with Team USA. And it was just that was, covering stories, but the personal effects with, juggling all of that with motherhood was really, that was always a struggle for me. But in terms of editorially, the stories that were toughest to cover always were those of parents just tragically losing a child. It's just, trying to contain. I cried during interviews maybe twice, and it's hard to contain your emotions when no parent should have to bury a child, truly.
But when you talk about it like that, and you too, Daryn, both of you, it reminds me of when I was a nurse, right? You don't want to become callous, but you also want to be there for the harder cases so that you can help. So there's always this and it was always the kids that did us in. Always.
Why do we? And the thing is, like, what? That sucks. Why do women have to choose between a career and having kids? It's like everything kind of happens at the same time. I just think it's not right, and things need to change in society, and we shouldn't have to choose between those two. We really shouldn't. But sorry, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent.
No, that's right. It's 100%. We've all talked about it before. And we've talked on the show about how we juggled it when the kids were little and what did we do? And what about book tour? And what about when Mary Kay was a reporter and working full time. So we've talked about it so many times.
Yeah.
But now I want to talk about your books. So you have both.
Excellent transition, Patty.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well done.
Writer.
Just right over the bridge there.
Yes.
So before we fell down that rabbit hole. So Paula, you know how much I loved your book. I remember the night you handed it to me in your house in South Carolina and said, be honest when you read it. And of course I texted you within days, but I love the opening scene in your book, which is so powerful. You walk us through your meeting with ABC News President James Goldston, where you tell him over a meal that you need to take a step back from the on-air jobs you had at the time. In your writing, you describe your sweaty palms, how nervous you were, how he was not expecting it, and you were about to tell him that you needed to take this step back. And the jobs were what all of us would consider dream jobs at the pinnacle of a journalism career. So can you tell us a little bit about that meeting and your book Called Out? And what does Called Out mean in this context?
Right. Well, Pat, you have to say that you like the book because I'm best friends with your sister, Jeannie. So
I still don't have to say it. I can stay silent.
Called Out. It's named Called Out because I feel like I was called out of a space where I think my personal values had started to clash with the choices that I was making. And the opening scene, the first line of the book is there's no rational way to kill your career. And that's what I really felt like I was doing. And I can't remember which of you said it at the very beginning, with Daryn and I, and we're both doing much different things now. But, you reach a point where we all kind of reach a point, this pinnacle of our career, and we think it's going to look one way, and it really doesn't. And it's that old adage of what good is it for a man or a woman to lose her soul, to gain the world, but to lose her soul in the process. And I felt like that. I had these dream jobs. I was anchoring Good Morning America weekends. I was co-hosting The View. I mean, I was, the sky was the limit for me. And I just looked around and I was like, at what cost? And I really felt this guttural instinct. I'm a person of deep faith that I was supposed to take a step back at the height of my career. So that's where the book opens with these feelings that knowing I have this piece that I have to pump the brakes at the height of my career, but also this fear of like, what the hell am I doing? What, I wasn't sure why, but I had to follow that piece in my spirit that this was the right thing for me and for my family. Again, the values were clashing with the choices that I was making. So I knew it was a decision that had to be made, but I was still scared as hell to do it.
And you describe it so meaningfully, meaning David White's one of my favorite poets, and he has this phrase about "let me be courageous in my terrors." And isn't that so good? And
good.
And when you described that scene, I was like, "That's how you're courageous in your terrors, right there." Yeah. But tell us a little bit also about your podcast, because you started that just recently, right?
I did. So we decided to blow up our lives completely. I left ABC in November of last year during the pandemic, and so when I pumped the brakes in 2018, that was my choice. And then last year during the pandemic, it wasn't totally my choice to leave ABC. So sometimes change is our choice and sometimes it's not. But I say, thank God that I got what I needed and not what I wanted. It sent us, we ended up down in South Carolina where my sister is. And we are just exploring new seasons, new chapters. I had an opportunity that was presented to me to do a podcast, and this is my podcast studio. It's really fancy, ladies. But this is where I record podcasts. It's called the Faith and Calling Podcast, Paula Faris Faith and Calling Podcast. And I talk to people about what they're called to do, who they're called to be. And, but it was crazy. Again, going back to that piece that back in 2018, that piece in my spirit, I knew I had to pump the brakes. The same thing happened when we came down for what we thought would be a couple of weeks in March of 2020 to South Carolina to visit my sister, and my husband and I just had this piece we were supposed to stay. And we're like, wait, why? Like, and we had nothing, no financial safety net. We didn't know why we were supposed to stay here, but we just had that peace. And we stepped into that moment. We stepped into that space of fear and terror and courage. And as you said, courage and terror. And the doors just started opening once we did. And one of those opportunities was the podcast. And what's really beautiful about it is it's allowed me, to be a mom first, to be able to take my kids to school. I've never been able to do that. I mean, we let go of our nanny last summer. I remember the day we did it. I said, kids, mommy's going to have to figure out how to mom on her own. And so I've been like momming without a safety net. But I've been able to put my kids first, but also have these passion projects, which it's been a real blessing for our family.
That's amazing.
That's amazing. So great. I can't wait. I'm going to go subscribe to the podcast right now.
I know.
Did you cry
it's really good.
When your nanny walked out? Were you hanging on to her ankles? Like,
oh my gosh, we had so many nannies. Well, I was kind of ready because I said I gotta figure out if I gotta figure out if I can do this on my own, because I've never mommed, and I don't mean that to. And some people might think that that's snotty, but like I worked.
What a big job!
I worked, and I had a job, but I was like, I've got to figure out if I can do this on my own. I really do. So I might be a crappy mom.
We need to all three are still alive
sooner rather than later. So
probably not.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's awesome. So, Daryn, you were the morning anchor. I love telling you about yourself. I'm going to tell you about yourself for a little bit while you sit there, and you can just listen and not. Okay. Yes, thank you. So you were the morning anchor for CNN for a long time, and you had a 12-year career at the network where you did some truly amazing things. And then in 2006, you were told your contract wasn't going to be renewed. So as we talked about earlier, the shift away from what you were doing began a little while before that, inspired in part by what you'd witnessed on September 11th and by going to Kuwait as a war reporter after that. But when you left CNN, you suddenly had no job. And realized you hadn't been married, you didn't have kids, and those were things that you really wanted. So essentially, you're at this moment in time when suddenly you realize that life didn't look the way you thought it would. So you realigned your priorities, and along the way, these pieces of your life began falling into place. A journey we experienced firsthand with you in the pages of your book, Hope Possible, which is subtitled, A Network News Anchor's Thoughts on Losing Her Job, Finding Love, a New Career, and My Dog. Always my dog.
Always my dog.
It's the best subtitle ever. So can you tell us a bit about Hope Possible and about the impossibly happy life that you have now, which includes a husband and 2 young adult daughters?
It does. Well, first of all, hats off to people like Paula who take things that they have, wonderful things, and let them go, because that wasn't me. I was shown the door. Nothing dramatic, just, we're not going to renew your contract. Yeah. And as Paula knows, usually when they say they're not going to renew your contract, you're out the door that day. With me, they called me in January and said, well, your contract's not up for a year. We kind of like you to stay. We'll keep you on the air. I think we'll let you know. So every day I came to work for 9 months. I didn't know if that was my last day at the place I spent 12 years. So it was eventually the last day. I left. I could have, I guess, as an inside baseball thing, Paula, like the thing that you would do then is like you'd either then go shop to MSNBC or Fox or the other networks.
You talk to all the networks.
Go back to local, and none of it. I was like, you know what? It's going to end eventually. So what's the thing? And I always loved uplifting and positive news. And so it was my little sister, as long as we're calling out sisters. I tried to sell the idea because I was not an entrepreneur. I couldn't sell the idea. And it was my sister who said, what are you doing? Like, why are you giving this away? Start a website, launch a company, and do it. And that was one of the benefits of being single. There was no husband or kids or anyone to consider. And I had pretty much banked my last contract at CNN. So I just financed my own company and started doing that and did that and tell me when I've gone on too long, but did that for about 4 years. Had not been on when I say I was single, I mean, not a date for 4 years, like nothing.
Oh, wow.
Nothing. And met my now husband through my 2 gay boyfriends, which answers the question, how are you ever going to be a nice guy if you're only hanging out with your gay boyfriend?
I love that. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go,
But
Mom. That's how.
they were and are 2 gay dads, and their son was in the same elementary school class grade as my now husband, who was raising his young daughter by himself. His first wife had passed away, so he was a young dad raising. So they were dads, raising kids. And we met at a summer festival, and one of the dads turned to me afterwards and said, "So what did you think?" And I said, "Huh." He's like, "That's more than I've heard out of you in 4 years." So he went on the parent contact list, and he emailed Trent and said, "Hey, just wondering, if you were available." To which Trent said, "I thought you guys were happy together." He's like, "No, I know you're straight. Daryn, who we introduced you to." So anyhow, 2 years later, so we started dating. 2 years later, we got married. I legally adopted his daughter. That was my sideways into motherhood. And then the year before I'd met them, when I was having a pity party moment, my best friend made me sign up for Big Brothers Big Sisters. So I was mentoring this little girl. She kind of folded into our family and ended up coming to live with us full time. So I went single, never married, to married with 2 kids, 2 girls.
Beautiful, Daryn.
Yeah.
That's
incredible.
Yeah. I love, Daryn, that you just kind of created the life that you wanted to.
Isn't that amazing? I love that.
I did, but I feel like it got created bigger than I could have ever. It's so much bigger and better. The guy I got is so much bigger and better than anybody ever dated. The daughters I have, I'm completely convinced these were the daughters I was meant to raise. There was no urge that I had to have a biological child. We all kind of like on this 4-way journey to each other.
It's beautiful.
That's
so beautiful.
So that's the book. That's the book.
That saying, man plans and God laughs.
Yeah, I know.
It really sounds like something that like one of us would make up in a story, and people would be like, "Yeah, sure."
I know.
Hey,
I know, but it's
one of you should write about it. One of you should write about it.
I think one of us already
did. Well, I mean, do it like in the novel form.
On the professional side, along the way, I picked up the syndicated newspaper column, and it kind of followed the journey of dating, meeting a nice guy, getting married, becoming a mom. Like these topics would be weekly. Along the way, I decided I wanted to be like you guys and become a fiction writer. So I spent 2 years working on a novel. That was so bad. My book agent cried. He said, "I love you, but I can't submit this. This is so bad." And so I cyber stalked Kristen and made friends with her. That's how we became friends. Like, will you be my friend? Like, will you be my book coach? And she's so nice and so encouraging and gave great tips, and it connected me with an editor, and still it was bad. And so I'm trying on this novel thing. The new husband's like, "What are we doing? We're working on a novel that's not selling." And meanwhile, every week I get these emails from these people about my column. And so it was like, "Hello, this is what you're good at writing." So the book, So Possible, is 80 of my most popular columns of that story of looking for love, finding love, blah, 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 all that.
It's so cool. Well, and before we move on, can you tell us about your new show that you are launching on the new streaming service Loco Plus, Good News Lady?
Yeah. So the next thing is there's a new streaming service coming out based out of Atlanta. And it's the Good News Lady show. And it's something I've wanted to do for a long time. Ever since I left CNN, I've created all this content on all these different platforms, but the dream has always been to have the Good News TV show. And that's what this is going to be. And so it's launching this fall. Some of it's up there already, but we're kind of redoing it and giving it a new style. But it's basically about there is good news, and let's talk about it and celebrate it and feel it and hopefully inspire people to show that you can do good things.
It's so cool. I cannot wait to see it.
Yeah. Paula and Daryn, both your books have so much in common, as do the two of you. First, your books are about essentially trading in what looks like a dream job for a life of true calling, which is, of course, a paraphrase of Paula's subtitle. I know a little bit about that personally because I gave up my lifelong dream of being a journalist to strike out in 1991, so long ago, for a new terrifying life as a novelist.
What a
But thinking
mistake.
How'd that work out for you?
What were you thinking?
Ended
How's
okay.
that working out for you? How's that going?
I should have listened to my managing editor at the time who told me I would never be a writer. But that's another story.
Oh
There
my
you go.
gosh. We all have one of those in our
Yep.
lives, don't we?
It's always a
Yep.
man. It's always a man in a short
Yep.
sleeve shirt. Anyway, this is not about me. We discovered when we invited Paula on the show that she's actually known Daryn since 1997. You guys, I'm so old that our paths never crossed because I was out of journalism before you guys ever got into it. But anyway, Daryn, Paula was your intern at
Yes.
CNNS. Is that right?
CNN. When CNN and Sports Illustrated tried a joint venture, which inevitably failed, it was called CNNSI. And I look at this. I actually brought my card, my CNN card.
I don't think it works anymore. I don't think it works
Isn't that
anymore.
hilarious?
I don't think it
CNNSI.
works anymore.
It's
Are
not
you
going to
sure
work
that's not your
anymore.
high school picture?
That's hilarious. No, I've always
so
looked
funny. Oh my
young. But this was
Look at the little
1997.
tiny.
So my senior year in college, I went down to Atlanta to intern at CNNSI. Chris Rose was there, Inga
Yeah.
Hammond,
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Daryn Kagan. So I was doing a little bit of everything. But Daryn, I know you don't remember me. You had shorter hair. I was
Yes.
really impressed with you because Daryn was so she was just like the epitome of cool, calm, and collected. I mean, she'd be like seconds before live. She wouldn't have looked at any of the tapes really or read any of the copy. And she's just going with the punches. Okay. But I have a funny story about your producer, and I'm totally blanking on his name. John. He was kind
Jay.
of bald.
Jay Bollet.
Okay. Yes. So anyway, so back in the day, before we had like now when you edit, it's all it's all digital. It's non-linear. But back in the day, you had tape to tape, so you're editing and splicing tape. And so my friend and I, my peer and I, we are tasked with editing tape, editing the highlights for Daryn. And this is just standard at the end of the highlight. Let's say that, you've got 5 highlights on there. You always want to pad the tape out so that it doesn't go to black on the air. And we didn't pad it out enough. And we went to black on the air. And I remember he was so pissed at us in the control room. And I mean, you didn't say a word to us about it. Again, you probably don't remember any of this stuff. But from then on, we put like 7 minutes of pad on every single tape so we didn't go to black. But yeah, those were the days where you had to slice and dice your tape. But I was so impressed with Daryn, you guys. She was just, I mean, like, I've been around anchors and reporters for a very long time, and she's got to be one of the calmest and coolest and most collected that I've been around. I was just really taken with her. So
That's
so
awesome.
sweet.
and here you go.
Yeah.
This is what I looked like. I was a little chubbier. I put on the senior 16.
Yeah.
You literally look like a middle schooler in that photo.
I lived in Buckhead at the time.
Nice.
I lived in Buckhead during the internship. I tried sushi for the first time in Buckhead.
Wow.
Yeah. I edited tapes that went to black at CNNSI. I mean, there you go. That's where. So Daryn, really, you're responsible for everything I've ever done. So thank you.
But you never made that mistake again, right?
I never made the mistake again, ever. And that's the thing. Like, that's why I say, like, mistakes, like the greatest successes come from your failures,
Yeah.
So.
Good point. Absolutely.
That was kind of, so I got to CNN. I was a local news reporter, but I reinvented myself as a sports anchor, which is a long story, but that's how I got into CNN. So I had done that for a few years, and that's at the end of it, because it was at the end of 97 I switched over to news. And I'll share like one of my horrifying moments. So not too long, and I was paired with Bill Hemmer, and Bill, who's on Fox now.
Yeah.
And it was early in the news part of, being a news anchor, and I got a story, and I read, and it was about Kosovo, and I said Kosovo.
Oh,
and
no.
It was right when the president of CNN had come in the control room, and he was this large man, and he came in the break in the studio, and he yelled, it's Kosovo, blah, blah. I mean, I thought I was going to get fired on the spot. I didn't, but he left, and I turned to Bill, and I go, that was horrible. And he said, but look on the bright side. And I said, well, what could that possibly be? He's like, you'll never forget how to say Kosovo.
See, there you go. Bill Hemmer, he's such a nice guy. Like he's a great colleague. Yeah. He's somebody that it's rare to find colleagues that have your back, that aren't stabbing you in the back at the same time. Yeah. So Bill's one of those. He's a good
I love the stories about how you had to learn on the job how to pivot. But I wonder if both of you ladies would offer some advice to our viewers out there. You guys have done this. You ladies have done this about taking control of your own destinies and finding a truer path to joy. So what, besides how to pronounce Kosovo, have you learned that you can pass along to them?
And Bono.
That's right.
Oh, Bono. Daryn, I'm so jealous. That's my one dream interview that I've not conducted. I love Bono.
Okay, so Daryn, we'll start with you. Yeah. What's the nugget about pivoting and finding your true path to joy, besides finding a hot guy?
Yeah. I didn't even have hot on the list. That was like an extra, like, wow, okay. So it can be bigger than you dream. Yeah. He might be listening too.
I hope he is.
Biggest thing is the biggest power any of us have is you have the power to choose to be the kind of person you want to be.
It's good.
And so you can't choose what happens to you, but you get to choose grace, which I'm sure Paula talks about and carries as a value. You get to choose grace and gratitude. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, Wayne Dyer had a saying, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And you
That is literally on a podcast that I listened to this morning. That was like supposed to be in my life today. That's so crazy.
That's awesome.
And that's the truth. You get to decide what your story is. Mm-hmm. Paula's story could be that she could tell a huge victimhood story about her end of ABC. And it was barely a blip. There's nothing victimhood about it, because that's not how she sees her story. Yeah. And I could tell you a story how my life was not realized because I never had a biological child. That's not my story. My story is I have the two most amazing daughters because I have the exact children I was meant to raise.
That's so
I get to choose that story. Everybody gets to choose their own story and who they want to be.
Yeah, that's good.
How about you, Paula?
I think just kind of playing off of what Daryn just said, you can create the life that you want in many ways. My big message is that I don't have to do one thing for the rest of my life, but I had to first realize that my worth and value and calling weren't just tied up into a job, but it had to start with me realizing that my worth and value are from who I am, not what I do. And then giving myself the permission to try new things and to make mistakes and to be scared, to do it scared. I'm launching a company. I haven't talked about it. I'm launching a company end of the year, and it's going to be focused on working moms. And for so long, it's something that's been in my heart for about 8 years, but for so long, I tried to dissuade myself from going for it, because for a myriad of reasons, I was busy. I was comfortable in my job. Also, I was scared that other people would see me in a different capacity, and would I see myself in a new capacity? And I'm like, you know what? I don't have to do one thing. If this is on my heart, I'm going to take who I'm uniquely created to be, take those talents and gifts into this space and do that as best as I can and steward it. And it's okay to be scared. I say, like, I have a piece about it and I'm scared about it, but those aren't mutually exclusive. So fear is normal. It really is. And change is normal. And you don't have to do one thing for the rest of your life. Give yourself permission to try new things.
That's such a good point.
That was like 7 things. Sorry. I couldn't just reduce it down to one.
Awesome. I feel like I need to get off of here and go do stuff.
I know. It feels motivated. Yeah, exactly. Well, awesome. Ladies, just speaking of doing new things, you've both excelled so much at bringing good news to the world, which we kind of touched on a little bit earlier. Mm-hmm. And I think especially because people will be tuning in a lot this week to the news coverage of the 20th anniversary of 9/11. There will be the sadness and the sad stories, but I think there will be some focus on the good stories too. The heroes, the children who've done something to honor a lost parent, the family members who are doing things to remember. I think there's a lot of heartwarming stories that come out of that sort of thing also.
Right.
Quickly, because I know we're kind of starting to run up against time now. Can you talk, both of you, a little bit about why it's so important to share good news and why this is a mission of yours, both of you? Paula, do you want to start?
Sure. I just think it's important to not just tell people what you're against, but to tell people what you're for. And I think at the end of the day, when you just peel back the layers, there's so much more that unites us than divides us, and just focusing on that. And it's really, I think it may have been Daryn that said this earlier. It's really just a paradigm shift, and choosing. I mean, joy and gratitude is a choice. But I'm big. I'm an Enneagram 8, if you guys are all into that, but I have a strong wing 9 where I like to bring everybody to the table. Let's talk about it. Let's hash it out, but then let's make peace at the end, But I just think it's in this climate, we need joy and we need good news more than ever. And we need to know that there is so much more that unites us than divides us at the end of the day.
So true. And how about you, Daryn? You're the good news lady. I mean, that's I think of you and I think of good, positive, uplifting stories. Why is that so important to you?
It's important. I'm not anti-news. Oh, there goes the hot husband and the dog.
Hi, hot husband and hot dog.
Hey.
You promised me you would take care of the dog for this hour. I don't want to say that I'm anti-news. I'm not anti-news. I think it is so important to be informed. I just think it's also important to be inspired. That's why my whole TED Talk is about how to watch the news and get inspired. I think if you watch and get informed with the mission of getting inspired and the mission of what can I do, that gives you a natural boundary of, okay, that's enough. I've found out what I need to go do, and I've met and seen people that have shown me what's possible.
That's great.
And I think they're both really important. It's kind of like the main course and the dessert.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's good, Daryn.
That's great advice from both of you. Well, you guys have definitely, I think, inspired everyone, including myself, to, change your life and live better and all of those amazing things.
Christy, you don't do enough.
Christy, more. Come on, faster, harder.
Christy's the slacker. Is that what I heard right? Did I hear?
Oh my God.
27 hours in a day, right? No.
Yes.
But you guys also, you've brought so much joy to the world, but you're also amazing writers. And we have so many writers out there in our audience and us. This is really our selfish time. We want to ask you for a writing tip. So is there any advice that you would give someone who is looking into, breaking into what you guys have done? Daryn, do you want to start us off?
Well, if you want to be like me, don't write fiction, because what were the exact words? This is so bad. I'm so disappointed. This is so bad.
I mean, did that just crush you though?
I know. Oh, I was sure. I was going to write this one book, and I was going to be, Mary Kay. I was going to be at the beach, turning them out because people would love them. Fair enough. So I guess what I'm good at is writing essays and writing columns, and if that's what.
And I'm terrible at that. So
okay,
no, you're not. You are not. I have to disagree with that.
I would just say, write what you feel. Write what you are the most scared of telling somebody.
Yeah.
And when it's really a big mess that looks like throw up on the paper or the screen, go smaller. That's my one thing. I go like, okay, I'm trying to say too much. So look for the smallest thing in that big mess of your writing, and that's probably the nugget that you can actually write about.
That's really good. Cogency. I'm not good at writing fiction either. That's not really fiction's not my forte. That's the name of my book. That's
your next book.
Fiction's not my forte. I like to write about real life, and I'm probably more of a quippy writer. And to be honest, I worked alongside somebody for my book. I would send them sample chapters because and that's the thing. Be honest about your writing experience and what you've done and what you haven't. I've written news forever, and news is like writing for the ADHD generation. You get it all in 60 seconds. So writing a book is, and the narrative and the arc is so much different. So write to your strengths. And also write your passions. I never wanted to write a book. You guys, my friends that have written books have said it's like the worst experience in the world, because it's like this is my analogy. It's like birthing a child, and then this child you feel extraordinarily close with. Let's say something happened during the pregnancy and you just have this extraordinary connection, and then you hand the child over to strangers, and the strangers can judge your child. And so that's what it's like, right? It's something that you've literally poured yourself into, and then you just hand it over to somebody else to judge. And that was really hard for me. But write to your strengths and write to your passions. I'm writing a kid's book that I'm super passionate about. And I'm hopefully writing a book. I'm meeting with publishers the next couple of weeks, writing a book for working moms. So write to your passions.
I'll be ready to read it.
That's great advice. Okay.
Maybe we could work together on it. So there you go.
Yeah, there's your helper.
All the working moms.
How about that?
I like that.
Yeah. Okay, Daryn and everybody else, please stick around because we have one more question. And Paula, are you going to hang with us for a little bit?
I can. I've got 5 minutes. I'm actually hosting the Called Out Book Club. I released the paperback edition of this book, and it's got a discussion guide in it. So I'm taking readers through the 6-week discussion guide for 6 weeks, and this is week 2, and we're doing that at 8:30. So yes, I've got a couple
hop over there after we
Amazing.
finish.
I know you can hop over there. It's going to be on my
Instagram.
Instagram page.
Yeah. So if Paula disappears, just know that it wasn't us.
We didn't
do something wrong.
Wasn't us. Okay, everybody stick around. We will have one more question for both of these ladies. First, we want to remind all of you to check out our Friends in Fiction Writer's Block podcast. Speaking of podcast, we're going to always post links under announcements each time a new one goes out. It's a lot of fun. It's totally different from the webcast. So if you like hanging out with us here, I think you'll love being there with us this week. Every Friday. This past week, our guy, Ron Block, and Kristen talked to S.A. Cosby about his new novel, Razorblade Tears, which is tearing up the New York Times bestseller list. It was a big feature about him in this past Sunday's New York Times. And also this week, we'll have a brand new episode. Christy, Patty, and Ron chatted with Andrea Katz and Christy Barrett about their popular Facebook reading groups.
And speaking of reading groups, if you're not hanging out with us yet in the Friends in Fiction Official Book Club, you are missing out. This group, which is separate from us and is run by our friends Lisa Harrison and Brenda Gardner, is now almost 9,000 members strong. On September 20th, Patty will be joining to discuss her novel, The Bookshop at Water's End.
And next week, join us right here, same time, same place, to meet our guest, the one everybody's talking about this summer, Emily Henry, the author of the wildly popular novel Beach Read and People We Meet on Vacation. And then in 2 weeks, our guest will be our friend Wiley Cash. I know everybody out there loves Wiley Cash. And his brand new book, which is stunning, is called When Ghosts Come Home. He will be live at an independent bookstore in Charlotte, North Carolina, with a live audience for our show. It's the first time we've ever done that. Nice. So if you're ever wondering about our schedule, it is always on our Friends in Fiction website. It's always in our newsletter, which you can sign up for through a link on our website.
And I know that we've barely talked about this. You guys probably don't know, but Patty and Mary Kay and I all have winter books coming out and are partnering with Nantucket Books to do a Winter Wonderland subscription box. We were going to do 600 and they all sold out. So we added 50 more. The new little free gift is not a coffee mug. It's a really cute tote with this custom logo that we had made. And these fun hot chocolate spoons. And there are only about 10 of those left. So if you were wanting a subscription box, I just heard from Tim, we've got like 10. So if you want a subscription box, get on it because there are 10 left. So, and hang tight because in just a few minutes, we're going to be announcing this week's merch star on our after show.
Cool. That's right. Okay. Now for the last question, the one that we love to ask. Daryn and Paula. I'm going to go with Paula first, just in case she has to fade on us.
Yeah.
Paula, what about the history? What was your writing life? What were the values around reading and writing in your childhood? Were your families readers or writers?
Not, my mom was a big reader. I always gravitated towards Nancy Drew, any sort of mystery novel. And that's what I like. When I think about, like, when I read today, I have to have I just have to have a page turner, some sort of thriller. My favorite book that I've read in the last 2 years was The Silent Patient. I think I ignored my entire family for 24 hours and read it. So, but that's what I gravitate towards. I mean, I like to read other genres, but thriller, mystery, that's me. So
It's awesome.
And Daryn, what about you? What were the values about reading and writing in your childhood?
I would say it was by example. My mom was a big reader. She always had a book. So I think that's where I kind of fell in love with reading. And then the reading and writing stuff always came more easily to me than the math and the science. And yeah, still a reader today. I think my genre, I love, my favorite are anything multi-generational.
Sweeping.
I don't know what I love immigrant stories. Just and I guess I don't know if you asked this, but I am a tablet reader now, not a book reader, which is why my book.
Really? I can't read on a tablet.
Yeah, because to me that means my books go with me everywhere. Then my book, I have the app and.
I like to bend the pages and like I like to.
I know.
I get it. I love the
like
idea.
To write in them.
I like
Yes, exactly.
Harder to do on a tablet. That's true. Yeah. All right. So to all of you out there, we encourage you to grab Daryn's Hope Possible and Paula's Called Out, especially this week when we need to be reminded of the power of good news and our own potential to find a truer path in our own lives. So thank you, ladies, so much for joining us tonight. It was so nice to have you.
Wow,
and
y'all were amazing.
And we're so grateful that that you both opened up. I feel like we both you both had so many valuable, wonderful things to say, and we're really grateful for that.
So fun.
This will be to be continued when Daryn and I plan our get together.
Exactly, which we're invited to, right?
I love that.
That is it.
If we find out that y'all got together without us,
there's going to be trouble. Yeah.
Daryn, we'll just not tell them. We just can't.
Nothing on social media. Nothing on social media.
Post it or we will know.
All right, ladies.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. God bless. Have a good night. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
All right, everybody out there, we will see you all in a minute for the after show. You'll want to stick around for this one, as we'll be sharing our own memories of September 11th. And Meg, our dear friend and managing director, who was in Lower Manhattan that day, will be sharing her memories too. We would love to also hear your memories in the comments. We often go back and read them after the show. We love hearing when you share your thoughts with us too. So don't forget to come back next week, same time, same place, as we talk with Emily Henry, the author of one of the hottest books of the summer. And good night, everybody. We will see you in the after show in 30 seconds.
Thank you for tuning in. Join us every week on Facebook or YouTube, where our live show airs every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And please subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram. We're so glad you're here. Good night.
Hey.
Wow.
Hey, ladies.
What a show.
It really was. They were so introspective, and they just both had so many valuable, meaningful things to say.
They both have done the thing we talk about doing.
Yes.
Brave enough to make a change and brave enough to, they're amazing.
Yeah.
I saw something this week. Somebody wrote on something I posted on Instagram that said, "Leap and the net will appear." And
that's one of my
both of them.
Oh, I love that.
I hadn't heard that before, but now it's my favorite.
I heard it in a Jason Mraz song for the first time, and I loved it. I never heard it until then.
It's a Joseph Campbell thing.
Yeah,
it's about about the hero's journey and about mythology and about following your bliss. And
yes, sorry, I didn't mean Jason Mraz made it up.
We just went back, like it just keeps. And guess what? He might not have even been the original. Like it just.
He's probably originally a Bugs Bunny thing.
I was
It's like something really absurd, and we're like quoting it.
I love it. Okay, so we have a lot to get to in the after show because I really do want to have Meg come on and talk to us about September 11th. But quickly before we do that, Christy, do you want to announce our merch star?
Yes. So if you guys do not know, we have some really fun Friends in Fiction merchandise. I was going to wear my t-shirt tonight, but I felt like this was like sort of a serious show, so maybe I wouldn't. But we have t-shirts and these adorable wine sippies. We're actually sold out of coffee tumblers right now, but we have some new merch releasing really, really soon that you guys are going to be excited about. But so every week for the next few weeks, we are going to be picking a merch star of the week. This week's merch star is winning a copy of Mary Kay Andrews' The Santa Suit. So Sean, can you show our picture of our merch star? Yay! Susie Baldwin, our merch star of the week. So thank you, Susie, for being such a big supporter of the show. I know she looks so good, and
I like her necklace with the pearl in it. So pretty.
Her view is amazing. But anyway, so thank you to all of you who have supported us and worn our merch and shout out the show. We love you guys. And Susie, if you want to get me your address, I'll get you your special prize. I think you emailed me, but you can put your pictures in our Facebook group. You can email them to me. You can DM me. I'm getting them all over the place. So thank you guys for all of your support. This is awesome.
Well, congratulations, Susie. That's awesome. And she's such a great
Susie's
supporter
a frequent poster, so that's great.
She is so supportive.
I'm happy
She comes to a lot of our events too, which is nice.
Yeah, she's great.
Okay. Sean, would you like to bring Meg on? Would you mind doing that?
Hi,
Meg.
Fast.
Good to see you. Well, Meg, we know we talked a little bit about our stories, although I realized I didn't write it into the script for me to talk about mine. So I'm just being secretive about my 9/11 story, apparently. But no, Meg, can you tell us a little bit about your memories of September 11th?
Sure. Before I start, though, Patty, you just said that you're so proud of Daryn and Paula for their reinvention stories. I mean, every one of you guys has done the same exact thing.
Yeah.
I mean, none of you started out your careers as best-selling authors. So, anyway.
Well, I think that's why it's so inspiring, Meg. Like when they're talking about it, we're all going back in our heads to those moments where we said, I'm going to try this. I'm going to do this. Right. And it's scary. And then you hear them talking about it and you're thinking, whoa, that really was this like dive in the deep end without a swimming lesson kind of thing. So they're really inspiring. So
you did it, Meg. You did it. I mean, you reinvented yourself and your career and went out on your own. And
proverbial lemons into lemonade thing.
Yeah. And we get to drink all the lemonade.
Lemonade. Thanks, Meg.
It's true. It's true.
So, Meg, did you want to tell us what you remember from September 11th? I was reading your story today on Facebook, and I just had tears in my eyes thinking about it.
It's still so raw, it dawned on me before when it hits me every year because my daughter will be 20 in 8 weeks, and so when everyone's like, "Oh, can you believe it's been 10 years? Can you believe it's been 20 years?"
Really? Yeah.
You know, I believe it absolutely because I have a marker on my calendar of exactly, when it impacted my life personally. But so yeah, I mean, I was pregnant, very pregnant with Grace at the time, and taking the train I lived in Summit, New Jersey, and I was taking the train to Lower Manhattan. I worked at Penguin, and so that was on the corner of Houston and Hudson. So after everything happened, that Houston Street was the demarcation line where you weren't allowed to go back into the city below Houston Street. So our offices were closed for a couple of weeks after that. But so yeah, I mean, I had been taking it a little easy on myself because it wasn't the easiest pregnancy in the world, and I was super swollen and just a hot mess. I had one pair of shoes that fit me. It was not pretty, and I was late to work. And so I was on the train looking, I took the train from Summit to Hoboken, and then in Hoboken took the path, and then got out of Christopher Street and walked a few blocks down. That was my daily commute. And I looked out the window, and there weren't that many people on the train because we were like the late goers. We were the lazy bums. And there was smoke pouring out of one of the towers. So that shows you it was, after 8:46. And so we were all like, what do you think that is? Just talking amongst each other. We all started calling whoever we could. So I called Dave. He was home. He worked from home. And I said, you need to turn on the TV. Something's happening. There's smoke pouring out of one of the towers of the Trade Center. And so he's standing in our living room on the phone with me, watching as I'm watching out the window of the train. And right that second, the other tower got hit as we're both like watching it live. Yeah. And so he says, when that train pulls into Hoboken, I don't know what the hell's going on. You need to come home. Like, just get on the train and come back.
Chills.
And so this is exactly what Paula and Daryn were saying. Like, you just didn't know what it was at the time. And you thought, I've been to work in weird situations before. I've been to work in blizzards and power failures. And, it's not like me to not show up for my people, for my boss, for my employees. So I was like, no, I'm going to go. I'm just going to go and we'll see what this is. I'm sure it's just some freak thing. And so I got to Hoboken and I got on the PATH train and the doors closed. And I thought to myself, like, oh my God, I think I just made the biggest mistake of my life, because who knows what's happening in the city and how am I going to get back out? And so I was just very glad that it pulled into Christopher Street and that the doors opened. And then I walked up onto the street into daylight. But, then it was what everybody, what you see on TV. There's no point in wallowing in the, like the sights and the sounds of the day, but it was a crazy day. It was really hard to get a phone call out. Everybody was worried about me because I was pregnant.
Sorry. Wow.
The only way to get out of the city in a moment like that, and in a power failure, terrorist attack, is by boat or on foot. So the whole day became about, like, how is anybody going to get out of here? How are we going to safely get to, when I lived in New Jersey, the only way is across the river. The only way across the river is on a boat. And, I had coworkers who walked 100 blocks or over the Brooklyn Bridge and then into the outer boroughs. And so I ended up taking the boat home that day, like way later in the day. I had coworkers who had children working in the towers, who had husbands,
Wow.
And Meg, talk a little bit about the people who actually let you get on that ferry.
Yeah. Well, and that, it's funny, like the weird things I remember about a day like that, because I always remember the clothes I was wearing. And I had on all black. And then over the black, I had on like an open button-down shirt, which I never would have taken off. Like, I've, walking around with a big giant belly and a black catsuit. But it was warm and I was pregnant. And so we started walking in this big group to try to get to the boat, which was, far. It was a long walk. We had to walk up to like the 30s. So, if you know Manhattan, that's pretty far. And so there was a lot of people waiting to get on the boat. And everybody, the stories you hear are true. Like, everybody was very calm and respectful. And they were, it was peaceful for sure. 2 years later, oddly enough, I was also pregnant with my son, Jack, during the blackout. And that was a different story. People were not very nice. Don't believe those stories. But anyway, I got to the ferry and, the line was hours long. And I had just walked 30 blocks and I was very visibly pregnant. And so one of the people that worked at the ferry terminal were like letting me into the front of the line, but I didn't want to go alone. I obviously wouldn't have been alone on the boat. There were a lot of people, but there were people covered in ash from head to toe. There were people who had, been there in it. Right. And, it was like a war scene. And so I just grabbed this kid who worked with me. He was like 21. I was like, this is my husband, and he has to come with me. And so I grabbed this for Justin, and I'll never forget him because, you know, he saved himself a few hours of waiting online for the boat by pretending to be my husband and my baby dad. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I tend to not like to wallow in the actual memories of it, and rather would instead think about, like, you know, what are the takeaways, you know?
Yeah.
And there's been a lot. There's been, you know, good ones for those of us that were lucky enough to not
Walk
be
away.
like directly impacted that day, for sure. Yeah. I mean, it's weird to be in my shoes because there's a lot of people in my life who, like, I'm the closest one they know to, who was, you know, to the action. But to me, I always, there was a long time after where I felt like I don't have a story. Like, that's not, you know, because so many of the people that I knew, neighbors, you know, friends, lost people, and you know, I thought, this isn't my, like, I don't really have a survivor story, but everybody does.
do.
Everybody.
Well, and 20 years later, when we watch the imagery and we see the things that we've seen every year for 20 years, people covered in ash, people going for the boat, people walking over Brooklyn Bridge, we can forget that it was a person, you, Meg Walker, pregnant with a daughter who's now 20, right? Like, we've seen it so many times that we forget about, or we can, until you tell it again, and it goes back to the person, back to the individual.
And of course, I'm thinking about poor Dave at home.
Worried to death about you. Yeah.
Him and my mom, my grandmother, like, everybody was just a wreck, and it was really hard to get a phone call out. So there was a lot of time that stretched out of where no one knew anything, you know, and so yeah, that part was not great. I mean, that was the best reunion ever because I walked to the train from our house in Summit, and you know, he knew at that point that I was what train I was on, so he walked across the park to meet me, and it was like lovers across a cornfield. Like, I just couldn't, you know, I couldn't wait to get back to my people, and then, you know, just the survivor's guilt type of stuff of, like, all people that didn't have that, and to look at the parking deck at our train station, all the cars that were left. And day, those cars were still there, and every car has a story, you know.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah. And then, you know, weeks, like I said, because our offices were closed, and this was there was no real ability to work remotely then. And so the world kind of stopped, and we just became obsessed with the news. But, you know, I was going to, like, pre-K, you know, no, what are the breathing classes that you take when you're pregnant?
Lamaze.
And I'm like, I said to Dave, like, you know, every day you'd watch the news and you'd cry, and then you'd open the paper and you'd cry. And I said, like, I just started to be worried about, like, what does grief do to a pregnancy, you know? And then, you know, you start thinking, like, what is this world that I'm bringing this kid into? So there was so much heaviness, you know? But I think, you know, looking back, there were, like, really valuable lessons too about, like, never leave without saying goodbye, you know, never leave the house without saying I love you. That kind of stuff. And
I also think it's really beautiful that, you know, when you were talking about getting on the boat, you were talking about people helping people and being good to each other, and people letting you go because, you know, you were very, very pregnant. And, you know, it's I don't know. That's one of the things that always strikes me about these horrific stories is that you also hear these stories of goodness and of humanity and of the best of people kind of rising to the surface in the darkest times.
Absolutely. I mean, and that was all around, you know, I mean, and that was overwhelming in its own way, but it was just really, it's like Mr. Rogers says, right? Like,
that's exactly what I was going to say.
They're always there. And there was so much goodness, and there was so much unity after that, as you remember.
It was. Yes.
I think people have this image, people outside of New York have this image of hardened, calloused New Yorkers who would step on you to get to a bagel.
pizza.
That only happens in blackouts, apparently.
I mean, all of those. I mean, there's such really unfair cliches because I've rarely had anybody in New York be unkind.
Anything but kinds. Yeah.
Course,
Right. And maybe that's because I present as a stupid rube and they want to help me.
Not at all.
Wow, that's powerful.
It's interesting because I think another stereotype we have is of the French, right? Like you think of
definitely, yeah.
French people, being insulting to American tourists. It's not a stereotype I've ever experienced, but that's a stereotype. But I lived in Paris the summer after that, so less than a year later, and I cannot even begin to quantify the number of people who, when they heard my American accent, came over and put a hand on me or squeezed my hands. I mean, it probably numbered in the hundreds. Just hearing my accent, people would come and say, "I'm so sorry for what happened to your country," because it was so fresh in their minds. And I will carry that with me always because it was just as dark and awful as that time was. I think there was a brief period of time where we were together as a world.
We were one.
I mean, there was truly, I mean, it must have happened over 100 times where strangers in France would hear my accent and come over and say, "I'm sorry," or I hurt for your country, or "I ache for you," or "How are things in America?" It was, and I've never experienced that since. I've been back countless times. It was just in that window of time afterwards where it was still fresh in our hearts and minds. And I don't know, that really meant something.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Oh, sorry.
Meg, I think you're on mute.
My dogs are barking, so I think in the years since, I would struggle at on the anniversary and stuff. And what's the right way to what's the right thing to say? What's the right thing to do? And it's for me, it's been different pretty much every year. But I used to really resent the never forget all that. And I felt like everyone who wasn't in it would say these what felt old
like cliches,
cliche. And I was like, if you were there, you could never possibly forget. But I honestly softened on that over the years because I feel like you have to show people some grace. Everybody has their own way.
Everybody has a story.
Grieving and of dealing with a horrific occasion. And if for them it helps to, I don't know why, for some people it helps to show the horrible pictures over and over again. I just will choose not to look at them. I won't get mad at that anymore. I'm just going to choose not to look at that. But everybody's got their own story to tell and their own piece of it. And so, I had friends who I was with a day, who I worked with a day, who are like, I don't go on social media on 9/11. I get mad at everybody. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to, I don't want to wallow. And I think, some years that's what you need to do. Some days that's what you need to do. Some people, that's what they need to do. So just have a little mercy and
a little compassion.
What they want to do. Yeah.
You know what's interesting about that? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Move.
I was just going to ask Meg if it's a coincidence that the daughter you were pregnant with is named Grace.
Aww.
I just love that name, but I never made that connection. But she was the calmest baby too, which I think was just such a blessing because I feel like she came out of the womb just smiling and zen in the Buddha pose. She never cried. She was so easy. And I was like, thank God, I don't think I have it in me to deal with her.
The Buddha pose. None of my children came out that way. Not one. Not one. I wasn't willing to try it a fourth time. No way.
It's never too late, Patty.
No, it's beyond too late. Maybe I know I posted about this, but my son just got a dog. So I have a grand dog and it is a super Zen puppy.
I loved that post when you were like, people have posted about their grand dog. And
I'm like, whatever. But I have a Zen grand dog. Does that count?
Yeah.
Meg, thank you for sharing that. That is so
that
powerful.
Was beautiful.
I've read bits and pieces of it that you've written about, but to hear you narrate it, whoa. Yeah. Just like a gut punch.
Incredible. Yeah.
I think it helps people to hear some of that. And another thing I was had very mixed feelings about the 9/11 museum and memorial, not the memorial, but the museum. And I swore I'd never go. I don't need to go. I lived through it. I don't want to see that, until my kids were like in middle school. And they, you know, they had assignments. Ask somebody you know who was somehow involved in 9/11, like what their memories are. And so we talked about it, and they heard the stories, and they've heard the stories in bits and pieces over the years. But like when they were both in 8th grade, they did this whole unit on it. And so then they were very interested in going to the museum. So we did do that.
Oh, wow.
And I have to
You
say,
did.
if for anyone who hasn't been, it's certainly not a lovely museum experience. You're not there to admire any beautiful artwork or creativity, or, you know, marvel at someone's talent. But I imagine it's similar to the Holocaust Museum, where it's a very immersive experience.
It is.
And having lived through that day, I can tell you they bring it back, whether you want this or not. Fair warning. I mean, they bring it fully back to life.
Wow.
So, you know,
That's an honoring, though. Just like the Holocaust Museum when I went last month, right? At first, you're like, wait, why would I? And then you realize it's an honoring. Like there is something about, you know, it's like the book you write, Kristen. It's an honoring. Yeah.
I wish there wasn't a gift shop, maybe, but I think, you know, it's an important thing to see. I think if you want to, and if you know, if you're interested in it, it's very well done. And with the four of my family went, and I think do something very happy afterwards. Like we took a walk over the Brooklyn Bridge on a beautiful sunny day and got pizza in Brooklyn. And, you know, try to cleanse your mind after. But it is. I'm not mad at the museum anymore. I think.
I'm not mad at the museum anymore.
I think it's an important thing for the future too, because. You know, now we have a whole generation of young adults coming who have no memory of that. You know what I mean? Who were either too young or weren't born, you know? So
that's why I always thought that museums for them, it's not for people who may have been through it. And then, you know, but then, you know, to go with my kids and have them ask me questions about it and, you know, be able to answer it. It was a valuable experience. It really was. And so, I mean, I think whatever people want to do, whether they want to go or not go, or whether they want to tattoo never forget on their arm, or you know, post ugly pictures, like whatever it gets you through the day, I respect it. Like, you know, to each his own kind of a thing.
Well, all right, ladies.
Well, what a powerful evening. Meg, I'm so glad you came on and shared that. That was just what an inspiring show tonight. I mean, just
it was.
I'm going to be watching that again.
I was going to say, I'm going to rewatch it for sure. It was awesome.
Yeah, I find it fascinating to hear the stories from behind the camera, because you watch sometimes these, I mean, covering Newtown from 9/11 or any of it, like you're human, you know, and to think how that.
And they have kids. Right.
You know, when I was working for People, I covered. Do you remember the Terry Schiavo story? She was
yes.
She was on
life
support that her parents wanted to keep her on, and her husband wanted to take her off.
Yep.
And I was reporting that story for People, and you're supposed to stay detached, right? But it was something that like a lot of cameras were on. And the day that they came out to announce in a press conference in front of the hospital that the court had ruled against the parents and they were taking her off of life support, I burst into tears. I mean, like I had just gotten so invested myself in the story, which you're not supposed to do. Which was all fine that I burst into tears, except that I burst into tears on national television. And so I immediately got a call from my editor saying, could you at least try to appear impartial? I'm like, wow. So it's hard. It's hard when you know, because as a journalist,
I'd be bad at it. Obviously.
Wait, that was not my strong suit.
Meg, you're Irish. We can't help it.
No,
nothing we can do about it. And then we turn all red, and our faces get all red.
Oh, I get blotchy.
I get blotchy, and it's not pretty. I've never
was
been able to cry
so
pretty.
sad.
No.
No, I'm the worst crier, and like the most obvious crier too. If I had been a subtle crier, nobody would have noticed. But it was like, yeah.
I don't think any of us are subtle anything, to be honest.
Right. I think that sums it up.
And maybe that's why this is the right career for us, where you
There
can
we
lead
go.
with your heart, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, ladies, you're amazing.
All right.
I love you guys.
Thanks,
Love you
Meg. And
guys.
thanks to all of you out there who
Bye.
stuck with us and stayed and listened. And good night,
See you
ladies. And
next
good night.
week.
Good night,
See you
folks.
next
Good night,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Right.